Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Mustard Saves, and today we have a situation. If you're new here, I rely heavily on my local food pantry to take a chunk out of my monthly expenses. I try not to go out and eat out as often, and I also try to go to the grocery store as little as possible and try and get more creative with the ingredients that I have from my food pantry, which, is a great thing. But usually, what happens whenever you rely on food pantry or cooking meals for yourself at home and also trying to save money on top of it, that generally means that most of the things that you have in your house need to be cooked in some way, shape, or form. And this is what my refrigerator looks like. I don't know about you guys, but I'm seeing a bunch of condiments and I'm seeing a bunch of sauces. I'm seeing this all over here is like dog stuff, like dog food stuff. Just a bunch of pickles, some drinks. Like, I don't see a single fully cooked meal in this refrigerator. And my freezer is no better. So, I need to get some stuff meal prepped so that way I will be more likely to just go ahead and reheat leftovers from my refrigerator, or, maybe I'll portion some of it out and put it in the freezer. But either way, I do not have any like ready to eat type meals. I have lots of ingredients, lots of canned goods from all of my endeavors to the food pantry. And yeah, we're at a critical mass here. And so, in trying to fight that, like I said, we're gonna be meal prepping some stuff. I have actually written everything down that I'm going to be making. I have decided to make some banana bread, some peanut butter cookies, some dirty rice. I don't know if that's actually what it's called, but that's what they called it on the internet. It is a Cajun slash Creole style rice dish, and then I'm going to be making some fideo soup, which is a Mexican soup, and then spaghetti at the bottom. I didn't need to write all that down for spaghetti. And so, without further ado, let's get started. I've had these 2 pounds of ground beef thawing in a bowl of water for about an hour, and they are soft enough that I should be able to get them out of the package. I don't think they are thawed through all the way, but once they hit the hot pan and you start like breaking it up with your spoon, they'll be fine. So let me get the camera set up and we will get on into the cooking. To start, I'm getting all of my beef cooked up in one go so I can split it into 3 parts across my 3 different meals. I received this beef from one of my local food pantry visits that I didn't get a chance to film, but even if I had purchased this beef myself, I'm still working with $6 or $7 worth of meat, and that's a pretty steep cost when you're on a budget, so I wanted to be able to stretch the flavor across as many meals as I could, as well as I'm sure my cholesterol will thank me for it in the long run. I always have to laugh to myself when I get the ingredients out for meal prep days because it never looks like a lot of food on the table, but a lot of the stuff like rice and beans need to be rehydrated. So I look at it all and imagine one of those just add water labels you see on things like pancake mix. And it's a dumb joke, but I like it. On the topic of rehydrating, spaghetti is probably my favorite quick and cheap meal, and ground beef is certainly not necessary to make it delicious, but I do like the texture that it adds. If you're vegetarian or vegan, I've also used plant-based ground beef the same way, and honestly, I can't tell the difference. I spruced up the sauce with a bit of fried garlic and Italian seasoning, but just a basic sauce and noodle combo can be great on their own. Several different countries have their own version of a rice and bean dish, and all around the world, people create their beans in a different way. So, like, they cook them in a different way. And I know I will get some people eventually as my channel grows who ask me why I make beans this way, or will suggest other ways to make beans, which I do appreciate suggestions. However, pinto beans I make the way that my grandparents made them. So what usually happens is I start with a pot of fresh water, but I did not want to wash another dish, And like, what's a little tomato sauce and some seasonings gonna do to my beans? So this isn't a usual thing, but starting with a pot of water, you bring it to a boil, and then once it comes to a boil, you're gonna take however many beans you want to cook on the side, and you sift through them and pick out any bad beans, like any beans that look weird or like black or discolored, or maybe you'll even find like some rocks mixed into them. This bag of beans was pretty good, actually. I didn't find anything in here. You can like put them on a piece of paper and sift through them, and then just pick up the paper and put them back in your bowl to make it easier to like sift through things. Because if you just put them in a bowl to go through it, you're probably gonna miss some stuff. But anyway, once you've sifted through your beans and sorted them and all that, you're gonna give them a wash. And then what we do is we do not soak them overnight. We don't do anything special like that. We add them directly to the pot of boiling water. And then you got a couple straggler beans there. And that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and put a lid on this. And as it comes to a boil, I'm just gonna like keep an eye on it, make sure it has enough water. You want about an inch or two of headspace on top of your beans, depending on the size of your pot and how many beans you're cooking. Because even though this doesn't look like a lot of beans to water ratio, the beans will soak up and triple in size, as well as this is going to cook for between 1.5 to 2 hours. So that's also going to evaporate some of the water that's here in your pot, even with a lid on it. Some steam is going to escape. And at this point, you do not want to salt your beans. We're going to wait to add salt till about the last 30-ish minutes of cooking when they're kind of soft but not quite done yet. And then when you add your salt, you're going to want to wait to taste it before adding more salt, because it's going to take a second for the salt to get from the broth into the beans. So if you taste your beans and salt them until they taste good, then when your beans continue cooking and they soak up the salt from the broth into their like bean bodies, it's going to be way too salty. And that is a part that my grandparents didn't tell me, and I had to learn on my own whenever I was cooking them. I was just so confused why my beans were coming out so salty until I added a little bit of salt. It didn't taste like enough, but I was like, I'm just going to leave it. And then I came back later and the beans tasted just the way I wanted them to, because they had absorbed the salt from the broth water. And so yeah, like I said, we're going to put a lid on this. I'm going to put it to the side and keep cooking all the other things I'm making, and we will see these beans at the end of all this process. To go with my fresh pot of beans, I'm making an equally large pot of fideo soup. Fideo is a Mexican dish that doesn't necessarily have to be a soup. I've seen some recipes that have it as a noodle side dish, but I've only ever had it as a soup, and I will probably only ever make it as a soup. Hopefully we're coming up to the tail end of this winter weather, and I figured that this would be my last chance to make a soup. At the bare minimum, all you need is some vermicelli noodles, tomato sauce, chicken bouillon or chicken stock, and some garlic powder and onion powder to make a good fideo. But my grandma always added ground beef and cubed potatoes, so that's what I like to add. This is one of those recipes that you measure with your heart. The way I eyeball my garlic and onion powder is I will shake enough onion powder to cover the surface of my pan once, and the garlic gets 1.5 or 2 passes. And for this amount of water, I tossed in like 3 or 4 tablespoons of bouillon powder. And usually when I'm just starting, I don't add any salt until the end because the Knorr bouillon powder is pretty salty. But this did end up needing about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt at the end. While I was waiting for the potatoes to get soft in my soup, the last savory dish I put together was some Cajun dirty rice with the last bit of my ground beef. To me, this recipe just sounded like rebranded jambalaya, but then I remembered that Mexican food is also guilty of just rearranging ingredients and calling it something else, so I'm gonna let it slide. And I don't know what I was thinking, but in this clip, I did not add enough water to the rice, and I had to go add more later. As well as if you're going to use that Tony Chachere's, or however you pronounce it, seasoning, Please be careful not to pepper spray yourself. I swear I'm gonna have to start wearing a mask when I use this stuff because you can even see me kind of mush it into the water before I start mixing so that it would stop spreading into the air. And I was just coughing probably for like the whole rest of the time that I was in the kitchen. If you added the right amount of water the first time, then you're going to bring the pan up to a boil and pop your lid on and drop the heat down to low for about 15 to 20 minutes. And once that time is up, turn the heat off and let it sit for another 10 to 20 minutes to finish cooking. Don't take the lid off or you'll disturb the process. You want to give the water time to steam the rice, and if you leave the pan on, you're going to end up burning the bottom before your rice is done. And if you mix it around, the rice is going to get really gummy, so you kind of just want to leave it in place and let that residual heat continue cooking it until the rice is done. For the baking portion of my meal prep, I'm gonna go ahead and get everything out and make both of the recipes at the same time because not only do they use a lot of the same ingredients, but I don't want to have to keep washing my utensils over and over. And one thing before I get started is that I will link down in the description the recipes that I'm loosely following. I say loosely because there's just like some things about it that I want to change that I don't feel like making. So if these don't turn out the way that they should or the way that the recipe says they should look like, blame me and not the recipe. I'm sure they went through lots of trouble trying to get their recipes put together. So I hope this turns out because one of the biggest changes that I'm going to be making is to the banana bread. I have these two donuts right here that I got from my food pantry, and I should have put them in like a sealed container, but I just put them in the refrigerator, like in the box that they come in when you buy them from the store. So they are hard. They are like, yeah. And the sugar and the chocolate's kind of a little separating a bit on that frosting here at the top. But outside of being dry, these are still totally edible. I know because there used to be 3 of them here, but I ate one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toss these into my food processor, and then I'm going to add them to my banana bread recipe. That's one weird thing that I'm going to be trying, and we're going to see how it turns out. So let me get the camera set up again. While I was putting together all of these baked goods, all of my savory dishes were still on the stove cooking, so just know that all of these meals were prepared while I was multitasking. And as for these donuts, when I was grinding them up, they really came out looking just like breadcrumbs, and now I'm starting to wonder what else I could do with this concept of donut breadcrumbs. As for the baked goods themselves, I'm just going to tell you guys ahead of time that they didn't come out the way their original recipes intended. Unlike cooking, eyeballing isn't always an option with baking, and I just haven't been able to ever accept that. So my baked goods are always a bit subpar, but still edible. In fact, I've never used the same banana bread recipe twice in a row. One, because it can vary based on the ingredients I have, but two, I never remember to save the recipe that I used, so I've experienced more than one lost love in my life. If you're ever not sure if you have the right ingredients to put something together, the way I go about finding new recipes is I will literally just search the name of like 2 or 3 ingredients I have that I think will go good together, and then I add the word recipe at the end to see what comes up. For the cookies, I had plenty of oatmeal and peanut butter, so oatmeal cookies was a no-brainer, but oatmeal and peanut butter sounded like a complete game changer. And I'm sure they would have been if I followed the recipe, but I didn't have the amount of honey the recipe called for, so I tried making them with a different ratio of peanut butter and maple syrup, and that was just not the move. As you can see, the moisture content from that honey was probably very important, and by the time I finished baking these, they were more like granola power balls. Although this did give me the idea to try this again, but just leave out the egg and baking powders. and just having these as no bake power balls, so you might see me try that at a later date. For this banana bread, I got the recipe off of the Daisy website because I had this container of cottage cheese that I had bought to see if my dog would like it as a treat. She wasn't a huge fan, and I had some bananas to use up, so naturally I looked to see if I could put the two together, and here we are. I didn't have to blend the cottage cheese, but the kind that I had these really big curds. And while I enjoy chunky bananas in my banana bread, I didn't think I would be down for chunks of cheese. So again, here we are using the food processor. I used applesauce as a substitute for butter and added an extra banana to compensate for the addition of the breadcrumbs. And I think I would have gotten away with this idea if I had added more applesauce. I just didn't want to open another can, so I definitely could have used maybe another like half a cup of applesauce. I also maybe certainly overbaked them, but we're not going to talk about that either. While neither recipe came out perfect, I would say the endeavor was an overall success. All the starting ingredients were perfectly edible, and since I didn't outright burn anything, why should I not continue believing that they are still edible? I didn't like the way my audio ended here, so I'm recording this voiceover portion while past me waves her hand around for no reason now. I did this meal prep on a Sunday, and by the time this video comes out, it'll be Friday. And let me tell you, we have like 4 muffins left, maybe like 6 cookies. The rice and spaghetti is totally gone. We're about halfway through the soup and beans. And this was just overall probably one of my most favorite combinations of meal prep. And I very much enjoyed having delicious foods just a microwave zap away. If you have a very busy lifestyle, meal prepping can definitely take up a lot of time when you do it, but then later in the week when you don't have time to cook meals, it definitely makes a difference in the quality of your life. And that's everything I made today. I hope this video was helpful in giving you guys some ideas on what kinds of meals you can make to keep in your fridge. As always, if you liked what you saw or have any questions, please leave me a comment down below. And with nothing left to add, I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye!